and the Liberals are trying to unseat Higgs. I don't see it happening. I just wanted to tell you that that's happening in Canada because, you know, Canada Poly. Attempted abduction caught on camera at Vaughan Mills Mall. Really? The first time I saw the video of it, it was yesterday morning-ish, and it said carjacking, attempted carjacking at Vaughan Mills Mall. And it didn't look like a carjacking necessarily. It looked like they were trying to get that woman in a car. And then later on in the day, it was revised to, oh yeah, that does look like a kidnapping. My goodness, right? And I guess she was put in the car. So says an eyewitness to the whole thing. So that's, I mean, not great. What happened to her? Are they looking for her? Who was she? Who is she? Et cetera, et cetera. And man, just absolutely crazy stuff. And yesterday, the title of the video was that the rail strike is over. I think I got that wrong. Sorry, everyone. It seems that the rail issues are just beginning. Now, it seems that CN is back, but CPKC, that's the one, CPKC, is not running, and they're on strike as of Monday, and then CN's going to be on strike as of Monday. So we've got to start with the rail stuff. There's lots to get to. Let's get to it first. We've got to start with the rail stuff because it's kind of complicated, but it seems like the government set up in advance years ago when they were sorting out new rules for railroads, et cetera, et cetera. They knew that this might happen, and they stacked the deck possibly to make it happen, which not great, right? Like not great. Gov.exe says, the government knew a year ago that allowing for the extension of labor contracts so both CN and CPKC agreements would expire at the same time would lead to a nationwide lockout. They knew trying to force them back to work would lead to a strike. They've done everything in their power to make this happen. This crisis isn't going to go away anytime soon. People need to be prepared and stock up on essentials. Things could get ugly out there. Now, like, I don't know. I don't want to incite any toilet paper riots or anything to that effect, right? I'm sure that, well, the government is going to do everything it can to limit the damage, right? Fingers crossed. Although, and I've got a video that outlines this, and we're going to look at it here. This one, he's talking about how we're already weeks behind with the delays that have already stacked up. And if all the promises that have been made over the weekend, et cetera, if there's no return to work, if CN goes out, then it'll be a month delayed as of Monday. So says that video. So again, take it with a grain of salt, but still very concerning because a month delay, it's not great. It's going to impact things, but, you know, manageable, I suppose. But if you continue, if there continues to be a shutdown port, et cetera, at this unprecedented situation continues, it's not going to be good for the Canadian economy. That's an understatement. Yesterday, I kind of glossed over this video. This is gov.exe again sharing this. How bad could a prolonged rail strike be? Catastrophic. So I played this I didn't play enough of it, so we'll play a little bit more of this from yesterday. Here we go.
Their way through the country by rail will stop with no real alternative.
One word, catastrophic. There has never been a rail strike where both carriers went on strike at the same time.
The economic impact would be catastrophic, quite frankly. It's a very unprecedented situation for us.
Normally, these two railways, Canadian National and Canadian Pacific Kansas City, negotiate their labor contracts in different years to avoid exactly this. But last year, the government gave one company an extension on those negotiations so that it would have time to incorporate new rules that had been imposed on the industry. That means both companies' contracts expired at the same time. And now both are in a position to strike.
Oh gosh, the impact would be huge. We're just not in any shape to manage even a short-term blockade.
So just how disruptive could this be? It's pretty hard to overstate how much gets shipped by rail in this country. Half of Canada's exports go by rail, and 2/3 of all freight that moves through the country, so that's goods shipped by bulk, that also moves by rail. $380 billion worth every year.
The supply chain in Canada is dependent on rail service.
And that rail service is really dependent on two companies, Canadian National and Canadian Pacific.
So it's bad. It's bad. Okay, this is a 5-minute video, so we don't have time for the whole thing, but it's bad, she says. Okay, here is an update from yesterday. This guy seems pretty good. It starts out a little loud, and so I'm going to back this off a little bit, but then it goes a little quiet. So I'll try and I'll try and normalize the volume as best I can. But he's got some great points.
Update on the CN and CP rail stoppage across Canada. First, after a chaotic morning, CN rail is back online. That's after the government stepped in and said, we're going to require binding arbitration to move this labor dispute forwards. The issue is now in front of the CIRB, and they have yet to make a final decision on the matter. Nothing is set in stone yet. After the government came out and said they're going to require binding arbitration, CP came out and said, you know what, we're doing a strike notice, and as of Monday, they're all going to be on strike. So where are we at today? We've had a 24-hour, 100% stoppage, and now CP's still not running their trains for a 40% stoppage right now, all the way through. We don't know when CP's coming back online. So now we know $1 billion worth of product has been delayed because of the 24-hour stoppage, and now $500 million worth of product is just sitting there and not moving because of CP. We're currently backed up 2 weeks as of right now, says CN. And we're adding a week delay for every 2 days that CP is offline. So by Monday, we will have a 1-month delay, and this is guaranteed. This situation continues to snowball into a financial disaster.
I don't know what happens to the volume there, so I'll just leave it there. Financial disaster, he says. Disaster. And Justin Trudeau, I just wanted to point out what he's tweeting about yesterday because it's just so ridiculous, right? If somebody said, Mr. Prime Minister, this financial disaster is bearing down on us, what do you think we should do? This is what he tweets out. What I heard from the team at Gris Astaire, the 2 LDS GB Ramalam Ding Dong community feels under attack with the rise in violence and hate. The community needs advocates like this more than ever, and they need allies to step up and make clear that in Canada, you're free to be who you are. What? I feel under attack because $1 billion worth of goods aren't being shipped during harvest time. I feel personally attacked by this, Prime Minister. Could you deal with that maybe? Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. Not serious, and not able to even accurately read the room, right, of the country, if you will. Holy smoke. Take the rail news with a grain of salt, but at the same time, is a month delay plausible? Sounds plausible to me. But at the same time, it may not be a direct, the whole system isn't shut down. And so it's not a complete catastrophe, although it is a catastrophe. It is a disaster. What's going on is not okay. And we could have avoided this. Something seems fishy about all of this. It doesn't seem like this is the usual order of things at all. And it seems like the good people who are trying to be reasonable about all of this and solve the labor dispute in a way that would traditionally be seen as Canadian. We'll stagger our work stoppage until you've got this sorted out, and then we'll do ours, or whatever. However it looks, right? It seems like those people are being sidelined, and the people who want to shut everything down and stop the commerce, those people are being brought front and center, and we're being told this is the way to do this. We have to do it this way. This is the only way to do this. And it seems fishy. It seems fishy to me. So there's definitely something weird going on with all of this. I'll keep watching this story. I think it's going to be impactful. I think probably Justin Trudeau should be blamed for this. The current sitting government should be blamed for this. They shouldn't have let this happen. This has never happened before, as far as I understand it in Canadian history. This would be one good reason to shorten our supply lines, right? Our supply chain lines. However, that's not the case now. And doing this kind of hard transition is bad for people. It doesn't help people. It makes uncertainty the order of the day, and people don't like to be uncertain. When things are uncertain, they cost more. And that's, bad, right? So the rail blockade, the lockout, excuse me, it's not a blockade, the rail lockout, the rail strike, all of this is not good for the economy, for what it means for Canada as a whole, for our ability to solve problems, for our ability to manage labor disputes in a way that seems sane, right? Like, all of this does not look good. And so we're at the mercy of people who don't seem to be dealing in good faith. And that's a problem, right? Moving on a little bit, we've got to talk about crime. And so, like, what kind of crime? Well, first, 6Buzz at 3 p.m., 6Buzz TV says, violent attempt at carjacking spotted at Vaughan Mills parking lot today. So Vaughan Mills Mall parking lot. And so this woman is being dragged into this blue car. And two guys have a gun, and they're trying to drag her into a car. And she's saying, like, no, please help, stop, right? And they get her into the car, and they drive away. And so that's not good. And Ryan says, this is an alleged abduction happening in broad daylight in Canada while our Prime Minister is busy bragging about people getting their teeth cleaned and a guy propping him up. Complaints about food prices. Yeah, Jagmeet Singh is mixing up potatoes and apples, and we'll get there. And so here's the video of the whole thing of what's going on. Here we go. See, she's in. I don't know if she's actually in the car. It looks like there's four guys putting her in the car. It looks like she got into the car. And here is a CTV news broadcast about this. And there's quite a lot of information actually in this. Here we go.
24/7, I'm Faiza Amin. Our top story this afternoon, an attempted abduction caught on camera in the parking lot of Vaughan Mills shopping mall today. And we have exclusive video of the incident showing a woman attempting to fight off the suspects. This dramatic footage sent to us by a City News viewer. You can see four suspects dressed in all black appearing to try and pry a woman away from a car. It happened today just after noon. Initially, York police classified this as an attempted carjacking, but have since told us the suspects were trying to abduct the woman. City News has spoken with witnesses in the area who saw the entire situation unfolding.
I see a Honda Civic zoom past me, and then I hear a girl screaming behind me. I turn around, there's four guys. Two of them have a gun. They start grabbing the girl. She's screaming on the top of her lungs. As soon as I see the gun, I step away from the scene, call the cops, and then the car drives off with her in the car, and then, yeah, that's all I saw.
Just terrifying. York Regional Police are now on the hunt for those four suspects. Officers tell us they fled the scene in that blue Honda Civic, which we have since learned is a stolen vehicle taken in Toronto on Wednesday. Police believe this was a targeted incident, but haven't told us anything further.
A targeted incident in that they targeted her in the mall and they wanted to kidnap her, and then they had a group of guys waiting in the parking lot to signal when a single female was walking to her car, and then they kidnapped her. A targeted kidnapping like that? Is that what they mean? Or do they mean that she's part of some kind of mob or criminality or something like that? I wonder what they mean, because it's not really clear, right? So that's pretty scary, right? Like, unbelievable stuff. Chrystia Freeland says 85 years ago, Hitler and Stalin signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. I'm probably getting that wrong, so apologies about getting it mealy-mouthed. Anyway, casting a dark shadow of communism and Nazism over Europe. On Black Ribbon Day, we remember lives impacted by this extremism. We must always stand up against authoritarianism and never take freedom for granted. That's rich, coming from Chrystia Freeland. And gov.exe says, Chrystia Freeland, we must stand up against authoritarianism. Also, Chrystia Freeland, freeze their bank accounts. Yeah, it's a little hypocritical. These guys brought in a Nazi, and if you subscribe to the globalist version of history, right? Because honestly, there's history that happened, and then, well, just like our media currently, there's events that happen. Our media writes about the event that happens. The writing about the event that happens is different than the event that actually happens. Same in the history books. Anyway, if you subscribe to the current history books that are approved by our current government, then standing up and giving a big round of applause to somebody who worked for Hitler and was a Nazi, etc., that's pretty bad, right? And nobody's been held accountable. Oh, well, I guess the Speaker of the House had to go because he's the one who organized it, except he wasn't, right? It was Justin Trudeau who organized it. So the whole thing is kind of weird. So Chrystia Freeland saying we have to stand up against Nazism after she's given a Nazi the standing ovation in the House of Commons, all of that's strange. All of it is very, very strange. She's authoritarian. She's tyrannical. She's saying we have to freeze bank accounts without charges or convictions or anything like that. all sorts of crazy stuff. So like when she comes out with stuff like this in the face of attempted abductions or actual abductions, because this guy said they put her in the car and they drove off. That sounds like an abduction to me. The news article said an attempt, like the police said they were trying to abduct this girl, whereas the witness seems to indicate that she was abducted, and the news is not clear about all of that. And the vehicle was a stolen vehicle. So all sorts of crazy things going on because of the bad policies of this tyrannical government. And Chrystia Freeland says, stand up for freedom, everybody. Stand up for what? Never take freedom for granted. What freedom? What freedom to say what you want? Freedom to associate with who you want? Freedom to vote for who you want? It won't count. So it's so strange, right? It's so interesting to see them tout this, but not they don't believe it, right? There's nothing behind the eyes in it. Here is Melissa, and she says, Toronto, heads up if you're going to the CNE or watching the air show. Pro-Palestinian group will try and shut it down. So there's a poster here. It says, stop the Toronto air show. The air show is blatant advertising for militarism, war, and violence. Yes. So we have to shut it down. We have to stop that. And I mean, jeepers creepers. So the Great Alberta Radio Show says, shut down these terrorists who promote these protests. So again, we have to stand up for freedom. When the truckers protested for their freedom, they were not allowed. The powers that be cracked down on the truckers. But when pro-Palestinian people, or really just communists, say we have to stand up against militarism and war and violence with the standing up against the air show, that's just fine, right? They're allowed to disrupt public like that. So my theory is these protests, I think number one, that these protests are paid for indirectly by the government funding NGOs. The NGOs then fund these protests with those funds. So we fund this, and that's not good, number one. But I think that the government supports these types of protests so they can say, look, we support peaceful protests, but they support these protests because these protests don't represent a direct threat to the government, whereas the people waving Canadian flags and going to Ottawa to say, we're not going to do this anymore, you people are tyrants and this is crazy, those people represent a threat to the power structure that is currently occupying our government. And so the government has to respond as if they're under attack. And so they did. And so now we are in a situation, we being Canada, are looking at this and we say, well, the truckers didn't actually represent a threat to Canada, but we misunderstand what Justin Trudeau was saying. The truckers represented a threat to them, to the people currently occupying the power structures in Ottawa. And so because it represented a threat to them, the emergency was triggered. That's why. That's the difference. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? I'm perhaps clumsy sometimes, and I try my best to articulate what's in my head. But fundamentally, and I've said this before, but I'm zeroing in on it a little bit better. This doesn't threaten them. They want this as a smokescreen to say, yes, we believe in political protests, or we believe in freedom of expression and protests and all the rest. But when something actually does threaten them, then they crack down on it and say that's terrorism. You can't do that. Meanwhile, the tactics used in one of the sanctioned protests are far worse than anything that the Canadian truckers did during their protests. And yet, the Canadian truckers represented a real threat, and so they were dealt with in a way that these protests don't represent a real threat, and so they aren't. I hope I'm being clear. So yeah, that's what I think about that. Robert says, Lawrence Greenspan, Tamara Litch's lead counsel, says this trial is unprecedented in that it involves a protest where demonstrators were directed by authorities as to where to park and protest, and then prosecuted because they parked and stayed there where they were told to go. Where is the criminality? Again, they represented a real threat. And so they should never have listened to police. Why did they talk to police in the first place? We have to have police liaison officers. Hey, police, why don't you go get the MPs out here to talk to us? We're not going to talk to you. You want a liaison officer? Get an MP, right? So, I mean, perhaps it was a strategy misstep, but yeah, they were I mean, if anything, they should be countersuing the police and saying you were maliciously misrepresenting the whole thing. If you were going to prosecute us for where you put us, why did you put us there? Right? Turn the table on them. So it's very, very interesting, especially again within the context of all of these violent protests, the pro-Palestinian, the attacks on certain subcultures, et cetera, that they're trying to make huge political hay out of and wedge people with. And I'm not going to play that game, but still, all of these things are not independently happening. It is an orchestrated dance in order to get a specific response. They want a specific response, and they want the response to be as violent as possible. I just can't stop laughing. And I'm sorry that I missed this yesterday. I told you yesterday I wasn't at my best. I didn't have my finger on the pulse the way I usually do. And just because I'm busy, I'm sorry that I'm so busy. But it's fun. I'm doing fun, busy things. So, I mean, there's things that you have to get done if you want to accomplish anything. And so sometimes that takes time. Regardless, here is Jagmeet Singh. And I showed this clip yesterday. But Jagmeet Singh is saying these potatoes cost $10 when he's holding up apples. I'm sure there's a great reason for it. It just struck me as hilarious. And somebody said, you're going to let the guy who doesn't understand the difference between potatoes and apples ruin your economy or something to that effect. And I thought it was hilarious. Here is Jagmeet Singh getting mixed up between apples and potatoes.
A sack of potatoes, one bag of potatoes, costs $9. A sack of potatoes.
The editing's kind of weird on this one, but he does. He's holding it there. He's like, these potatoes, $9. And he realizes later and he corrects, but I thought it was funny. So there you go. Apples or potatoes. And people are pointing it out because it's funny. And when people make silly mistakes, it's funny to laugh at them. Here is Ryan. He says, this guy doesn't even know the difference between apples and potatoes. This guy has the IQ of a walnut, and he's the leader of the NDP. Madness. They're puppets. So the dumber they are and the more they believe the rhetoric that they're spouting, the easier they are to control, I guess. I don't know. I don't have puppets, but I would imagine. Here is a Liberal, and this is in New Brunswick, and so there is a provincial election on the horizon. I don't know when the provincial election is scheduled for, but Higgs is fighting the election now, and Higgs is popular as far as I understand it, although if you ask a Liberal, he's probably an evil person or something like that. But I liked what he did with regards to protecting kids and not allowing gender ideology to overtake schools, and the steps he was taking there to try and make changes there. I respect that, right? That's pretty good. The Liberals are trying to make political hay, and she doesn't brand herself as liberal. Like if you look at her thing, her Twitter profile, she doesn't say Liberal Party leader, but she says leader of, and then the Twitter account, and the Twitter account is for the Liberal Party of New Brunswick, right? And she says leader of the opposition, MLA, and then she says where her MLA is. And so leader of the Liberals. And she says, New Brunswick has the highest inflation rate in the country. It's time for leadership that will make life more affordable. That's not going to be the Liberals. Are you kidding me? Holy smokeronis. And a meme says, a Holt government will make life more affordable. We will implement a rent cap. So the only plan they have is to destroy the rental market with a rent cap. Good idea, guys. Great idea. Remove 10% provincial tax on your power bill. Scrap the Higgs gas tax. She doesn't say anything about protecting New Brunswickers from from the federal carbon tax, right? She's going to remove 10% provincial tax on the power bill, but leave the carbon tax. Is there a carbon tax in New Brunswick? Is like the federal carbon tax happening in New Brunswick, or is Higgs protecting the citizens from that? Because I would be interested if she's going to reinstate the federal one and like balance out with the removal of this. I don't believe anything the Liberals have to say. So, but I'm not neck deep in New Brunswick politics, so apologies for my ignorance. But things seem to be happening here, and it seems like misdirection to me. It seems like misdirection, like, oh, I'm going to cut these taxes, but in reality, your overall tax burden is going to go up, just like the Liberals did in the first place in 2015 when they won, right? So they made claims like they were going to get rid of corporate tax cuts and give more tax cuts to the middle class, but that's not actually what happened. In fact, the middle class tax burden increased under the Liberals, I think every year since 2015, but I could be wrong on that. There could have been a couple of years where it stayed the same. It didn't get worse, but I believe that it's got worse every year. Holly Doan says Chinese Communist Party, because they like to take money in and then redistribute it, right? So carbon tax goes up every year. There are other ones that are being changed and moved, and people's incomes are being, like the income that's acceptable to tax at different rates is being changed and so on and so forth. And they say that this is all under the guise of streamlining and stuff, but it's actually carved out targeted giveaways in order to buy votes. Unfortunately, I wish that weren't true, but it is true. Holly Doan says Chinese Communist Party agents allegedly acted as Elections Canada poll workers in 2021, according to documents submitted to federal inquiry. Quote, they were afraid to vote for her because they feared repercussions. So, yeah, the what's it called? Chinese Communist Party is so entrenched that they're able to have poll workers, their own poll workers that they want, working in working in our election. How compromised are we? Why doesn't anybody seem to care? Because it's not like we haven't known for more than a year about all of this, right? And 11 MPs, nobody said anything. Jagmeet's got to get his pension, and so nobody's going to say anything, and so that's bad, right? That's not good. And the only people who suffer, or people who suffer more, are the citizens, because we're the suckers who are playing a game that's rigged against us, right? Ian says 2 years in prison for waving an English flag. Now, it seems like these are the same crime, but different people. I think they're different people. Masked Newcastle dad who waved St. George's flag while confronting police at Sunderland riot, jailed. Jack Fowler was sentenced to 2 years in prison at a Newcastle court. So Tommy Robinson's highlighting that. But also, here's another one, same thing. 2 years in prison for waving an English flag. An 18-year-old James Martin has been sentenced to a staggering 2 years and 2 months in prison, all for the audacity to march outside an Islamic center in Scarborough, North Yorkshire, brandishing an English flag. This draconian punishment handed down by the court marks a dark day where expressing national pride is criminalized, painting a grim picture of a society where one's freedom can be stripped away due to what was described as a night of stupid behavior. 2 years in prison for waving a flag? That's pretty crazy, right? That seems an unbelievable thing. Well, The Skeptic says, don't forget in 2016, a man named Kevin C. was given a year in prison for placing a pork sandwich on the doorstep of a mosque. He was later murdered in prison by Muslim criminals. Not good, right? You did what? You put pork sandwiches on a mosque? Death. Death. So I don't know that you can negotiate. I don't know that you can negotiate with people who come to that conclusion, right? And the judges who are putting these people in prison while releasing child rapists, how do they sleep at night? Seems weird, right? Hello everyone, thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful